Hello, and it is a pleasure to be with you. The Rudy Calderón official channel, poetry that connects literature to life, the Rudy Calderón official YouTube channel becomes especially interesting when it is viewed in the larger context of Rudy Calderón's own work as a Mexican-American poet, author, educator, and songwriter. What makes Calderón's literary voice compelling is that his poetry does not remain safely separated from real life. His writing confronts questions of identity, family, love, mortality, justice, society, struggle, hope, and the complicated experience of being Mexican American in the United States. His published work provides an important foundation for understanding the cultural and intellectual character behind the channel. Calderón has published a remarkably large body of poetry. His earlier collections include I Wonder If You Will Ponder, a collection of poems, 2003, Existential Fighting Through My Writings, 2004, Mi Familia Mexicana, Versos Sinceros, 2005, Letters to the Wind, A Transcendental Spirit, 2005, Verso Canto Ubicuo, 2006, Sangre del Sol/Blood of the Sun, 2006, Gritos en el Monte, 2007, Borrad la fecha de existencia/Erase the date of existence, 2007, and Destierro en Acapulco, 2008. By the publication of Capitan Sinmar/The Sealess Captain, Calderón was described as a contemporary poet and man of letters whose poetry confronts the struggle of living against time, space, and the tragicomic circumstances of human existence. One of the best places to begin understanding Calderón's poetry is his first collection, I Wonder If You Will Ponder. Even the title reveals something important about his philosophy as a writer. He wants the reader to think. The book addresses peace, violence, justice, social pressure, equality, love, pain, fear, and unity. In the title poem, Calderón asks questions about why violence continues and whether humanity has learned anything from the deaths of figures such as Tupac Shakur, Biggie Smalls, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and Mahatma Gandhi. His stated purpose was not simply to describe his experiences, but to expose his thoughts and encourage readers to make their own existential connections to the writing. That idea, will you ponder, is an excellent way to understand what makes Calderón's poetry relevant to everyday life. The poem does not simply tell the reader what to think, it pushes the reader to ask questions about society and about himself or herself. Why do people hurt one another? Why does injustice continue? Why do individuals sometimes surrender their values because of peer pressure? What does it mean to be a good person in an imperfect society? Those questions remain relevant because the human problems Calderón writes about have not disappeared. His collection, Mi Familia Mexicana, Versos Sinceros, moves the focus toward family and Mexican-American identity. The title itself, My Mexican Family, Sincere Verses, suggests that personal history and cultural identity are central to his poetic world. This is important because Calderón's poetry is not simply abstract philosophy. It grows from lived experience and from the relationship between family, culture, language, and American life. That cultural dimension becomes even more explicit in Mexican American. My Hybrid Blood. The book gathers Calderón's previously published poetry while also presenting newer work, and its description emphasizes his commitment to the Mexican American and Latino experience. It specifically notes that much of his poetry had originally been written in Spanish, and that the collection makes this work available in English, allowing readers to encounter the cultural, literary, and historical richness of his perspective. The idea of hybrid blood is particularly powerful. It speaks to the experience of existing between cultures rather than having to choose only one. For many Mexican Americans and other people with multicultural backgrounds, identity is not a simple either-or proposition. A person can be deeply connected to Mexican heritage while simultaneously being completely American. Language can belong to both worlds, family traditions can cross borders, history can exist on multiple sides of the same person. That makes Calderón's poetry useful not only as literature, but also as a way of thinking about identity. His later collection, Peregrinage, meaning pilgrimage or journey, continues this idea. The book is bilingual, with poems in English and Spanish, and includes works such as Son of the Americas and Tomorrow Will Be a Better Day. Its publisher describes the collection as expressing Calderón's love for the Americas while also confronting social problems and encouraging critical thinking and an appreciation of the world. Those titles alone reveal two important dimensions of his poetry: belonging and hope. Son of the Americas suggests an identity that is larger than a single nation. It invites us to think about the Americas as an interconnected cultural and historical space. Tomorrow will be a better day, meanwhile, points toward optimism, the belief that despite the problems of society, human beings can still imagine and work toward something better. That combination is one of the most appealing aspects of Calderón's work. He does not simply dwell on suffering, he uses suffering as a reason to think, question, and search for meaning. His poetry can therefore be applied directly to everyday life. If you are struggling with your identity, Calderón's writing encourages you to examine where you come from rather than being ashamed of your background. If you are experiencing hardship, his existential poetry suggests that struggle itself can become a source of reflection and growth. If you are frustrated with society, his socially conscious poems encourage you to ask difficult questions rather than simply accepting the world as it is. If you are worried about the future, the hopeful dimension of his work reminds you that tomorrow is not predetermined. And if you are simply going through ordinary life without stopping to think about it, the title of his first collection offers perhaps the simplest challenge of all. I wonder if you will ponder. That challenge is remarkably relevant today. We live in an age of constant information, short videos, notifications, headlines, and endless scrolling. It is possible to consume thousands of pieces of information without deeply thinking about any of them. Poetry does the opposite. It asks us to slow down. It asks us to examine a word, an image, a memory, a question, or an emotion. This is why Calderón's work fits naturally into a YouTube environment. The channel can serve as a meeting place between the spoken word and the written word, between the traditional literary experience of reading poetry and the contemporary experience of hearing an author present ideas through digital media. And there is another important dimension. Calderón is not writing from an isolated literary world. His background includes studying history and political science at California State University, Bakersfield, and earning a master's degree in teaching from Chapman University. He has also worked as an educator, and his poetry from one of his books was a required reading as part of a university-level literature course. That combination of poet and educator is significant. A poet observes, a historian remembers, a teacher explains, and Calderón's work brings elements of all three together. This helps explain why his poetry can feel larger than autobiography. His personal experiences become a starting point for discussing broader questions about culture, history, society, and the human condition. The result is a body of work that encourages the reader or viewer to become an active participant. You are not merely supposed to watch. You are supposed to ponder. You are supposed to question. You are supposed to connect the poetry to your own experience. You are supposed to look at your family differently, think about your cultural identity, reconsider your assumptions, examine society, and perhaps even imagine a better future. That is ultimately what makes the Rudy Calderón official channel worth exploring. Its importance is not simply that it contains poetry. Its deeper value comes from using poetry as a doorway into life itself. Calderón's original works give viewers different doors to enter. Mi Familia Mexicana opens the door to family and cultural identity. Capitán Sin Mar confronts existence, time, and emotional struggle. Mexican-American, My Hybrid Blood explores the complexity of Mexican-American identity, and Peregrinaje turns toward journey, the Americas, social awareness, and hope. And that is the real strength of Calderón's literary world. The poems are not only about his life, they give us a vocabulary for thinking about our own. A good poem does not end when you finish hearing it. It follows you. You think about it later. You recognize yourself in it. You disagree with it. You question it. And sometimes, without realizing it, you begin seeing your own life differently. That is the kind of experience Rudy Calderón's poetry can offer. And it is precisely why his work deserves to be discovered, heard, read, and above all, pondered.